owners meetings this weekend. I will be at the Biltmore in Arizona. We'll be broadcasting most of next week from there. I was going to stop in San Jose and catch the Terps, except that they didn't make it. But March Madness underway. But I got NFL on the brain, and obviously the Ravens spending more money in free agency, getting ready for the draft. No one covers the NFL better than this guy out at Bleacher Report. He is one of our defending champions and a very fun guy to follow on Twitter as well at BR_Doug Farrar. We welcome back the NFL lead scout for Bleacher Report, Doug Farrar, live from his Seattle home where the Seahawks are trying to climb the mountain like the Ravens and everybody else. Doug's been an interesting offseason around here in Baltimore, right? I mean, 8-8 sort of begets this nervousness that has come into the franchise where it feels like this is a year of production or deduction in some way.
Yeah, and so much of it centers around what I think everyone would agree was kind of an uneven performance by Joe Flacco. They lose Kyle Juszczyk, who people can say, oh, he only played 40% of the snaps and blah, blah, blah. He was a really important part of that offense. And for fullbacks these days to play 40% of the snaps is a big deal. They lose Ricky Wagner. They've got some question marks on both sides of the ball. And, they're always going to go after it. But, the Brandon Carr press conferences today, to me, that's a highly questionable move. If you're looking at him as a number one starter, I'm not quite sure the numbers of the tape match up to that.
Well, and I don't know that they are looking for that. I think they're looking for quality insurance, a nickel option. I mean, they're going to be in nickel and dime all the time in this division. They're going to get passed on. And, I think anything that feels like a healthy guy would feel like an upgrade from where they've been, where I don't know that they can really count on Jimmy Smith. And I would agree with you. Maybe Brandon Carr doesn't solve the problem that Jimmy Smith's not there. Maybe that problem's unsolvable without using, the first-round pick to do something to say we're going to try to solve this problem long term. I do feel like some of this is rubber bands and Scotch tape and other things, but everybody's looking to the draft as being their savior, much the way, let's say, the Cowboys went from the outhouse to the penthouse, even losing their quarterback because they had an exemplary draft last year.
Yeah, and the thing about Carr is, based on his history, at least he'll be on the field. He played over 1,000 snaps last year. Gave up 5 touchdowns to his 1 interception, opponent passer rating of over 100. So, you watch his tape, he's not necessarily great on, say, shorter routes and quickness to recover in short spaces, things like that. So you have to scheme him. He's pretty good in press. As long as he can trail a guy from the start, I think he's okay. But that precludes a lot of nickel stuff where you're backed up a bit and you're looking at two-way goes and trying to figure out what a receiver is doing based on option routes. It's not financially prohibitive. It's just the 4-year aspect of it. And of course, none of these contracts are what they say they are. It was kind of, okay, that's an interesting gambit you've got going there, Baltimore Ravens. Let's see how it works out.
It's been an interesting couple of years with all this money coming online that, we all sit around at the owners' meetings this week and say, these greedy SOBs, and Goodell wants to grow the GDP of the NFL to be larger than, Europe and all this stuff. And then the money floods in, and this makes... for better and for worse, it gives teams a little bit of latitude, as you said, to gamble out and say it's going to be a 4-year deal when you know it's a 2-year deal and you hope it's a good 1-year deal and maybe a bad 2-year deal. And that's going on everywhere, but the cap space has been absurd, even to the point where a team like the Ravens, they would have lost a guy like Brandon Williams 5 years ago because their cap wouldn't have grown enough, and they always sort of play to their cap. And then there are these perennial low-ball teams and teams that don't spend money, the Raiders, the Jaguars, the Browns, the losers. The Bengals have historically been that way during Mike Brown's tenure. But all the money coming in now at least allows that if you want to keep a player, you can, and the Ravens really wanted to keep Brandon Williams, so they did.
Which was a good move. Yeah, and the Raiders have spent the gross national product of a small European country on their offensive line, and obviously the Jaguars have gone for broke in each of the last 2 years, especially on defense. I mean, the Calais Campbell contract alone is proof of that. The A.J. Bouye thing. And then it's, okay, now we have all these guys. Do they all fit the scheme? And are we still tied to a horrible quarterback in Blake Bortles?
Oh, and who's our coach, by the way, this year? Right?
Yeah, it's that's a tough one. So, yeah, there is an element now of throwing money at the problem. I mean, the Patriots don't make a lot of mistakes, but when you bring Stephon Gilmore and you give him as much money as they gave him, and you're basically throwing Malcolm Butler out the door when it's been proven that in today's NFL, more 3-by-1 sets than ever, more nickel and dime than ever, you need two lockdown cornerbacks to really make things work. And getting back to the Jaguars, they already have Jalen Ramsey, who I think could be the next Richard Sherman, and now they bring in Bouye. They at least understand, and the Ravens, are certainly flirting with that reality, bringing Brandon Carr in because of Jimmy Smith's injury history. In today's NFL, because you have to spot the trends too. It's not just adjusting player to scheme. It's also, okay, where are the trends going? What is required in 2017 as opposed to even 10 years ago? 10 years ago, Kyle Juszczyk would have played 80% of the snaps on half the offenses in the league. Now it's a big deal if a fullback is at 30% or a third linebacker, and now slot corners and slot receivers are starters. So you have to stay up on the trends and understand what teams are doing and how they're moving their personnel around.
You mentioned, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just a final thought on that. It's even more important to be smart because now everyone has the money. So Moneyball becomes even more important.
Well, you mentioned Juszczyk and the 49ers, and, we went into this believing someone would covet Brandon Williams more the way the Raiders coveted Kelechi Osemele more last year, and they had the money, and Pernell McPhee with the Bears before that. In this particular case with the 49ers, that's a unique operation all the way around, right? I mean, we've seen this experimenting with Chip Reed and, Chip Kelly in Chip Reed. I'm mixing it. Chip Kelly in Philadelphia after Andy Reid. How about that? And then you see what they're doing in San Francisco, where this John Elway model and Lynch, this is a real precursor to Peyton Manning running a team next year, right? I mean, they're just going all in on this, and Mike Mayock's a candidate in Washington. The more things change, the more they stay the same for owners who, I like John Lynch, and maybe he'll be a fine executive, but I prefer guys who've, done this for 20 years as opposed to guys who are trying to figure out on-the-job training, which we have in the White House, so why not have it everywhere, right, Doug?
Well, yeah, let's not. Bad example. The thing, where Juszczyk makes sense, and this is aligning personnel to scheme. You look at what the Falcons did last year, and obviously Kyle Shanahan's our head coach, so you bring in kind of that Falcons offense. They played Patrick DeMarco, their fullback, in Atlanta, I think about 35% of their snaps. Patrick DeMarco almost never carried the ball because they had the two running backs. What he was doing was either blocking or flaring out into the slot or sometimes flaring wide. They'd have two, twin sets and 3-by-1 sets where DeMarco was the ex-ISO receiver. And it's very unusual to have a fullback doing that. So they bring in Juszczyk and, they overpaid him. Well, if you look at how Kyle Shanahan likes to deploy fullbacks, it's actually a perfect fit because Juszczyk is kind of DeMarco on steroids. So that's, I should say he's a better player. I'm not implying that Kyle Juszczyk takes steroids. He's a better version of that player. So that's a situation, in that one instance where you get a guy and everyone else thinks he's overpaid, but it's not just overpaid, it's value. And how much do you value a fullback who can get out and run, consistent, cohesive pass patterns? Whereas someone like, the Cardinals or the Lions who don't use fullbacks would be like, well, that's nuts. But that's just the way it goes. Elway had run an Arena League team. He'd been around personnel. He has had a lot of people under him who are really, really good at this.
And he ran a car dealership, too, like in the real world, did something other than X's and O's, right?
Yeah, Lynch is a really smart guy. He's got people under him who are really good football people. In that instance, I'd be far more worried about the ownership and the CEO than anyone underneath. And it's kind of the same thing. Well, no, it's kind of the same thing in D.C., right?
Oh,
They
there's no
had
doubt about it.
Scott McLuhan. I mean, whatever he may be dealing with or not dealing with, Scott McLuhan is, I will brook no argument, he's the best personnel guy in the NFL. No one spots talent better than Scott McLuhan. Now, if he is going through, a recurrence of things that have happened to him before, okay, that's too bad, and you deal with it. You don't make it public, because now you've created a situation that's so toxic that no one with any real credibility as a personnel man in the NFL is going to come in there and do that job. I mean, it was already bad enough where McLuhan was kind of on double secret probation. He could have, completely clean, he could have written his ticket on half the teams in the NFL, because he built the Niners team that went to the Super Bowl. He helped build the Seahawks team that is still a perennial Super Bowl contender. And he had done some good things in D.C. So sometimes it's not about, bringing this guy or that guy in. It's the people at the top. And those are two situations where it's a real concern.
Well, and obviously I've been talking about the Redskins here for 2 weeks, Doug, because we like to make fun of the Redskins. We're in Baltimore, But
yeah, as you should.
Oh, absolutely. And what do you make from afar on the nonsense going on there? It's team turmoil. It always has been. And, look, I cover the Orioles here, right? I mean, you could deodorize it for a while, but then reality sets in and the place isn't well run.
Well, to use another baseball analogy, being in Seattle, I've watched the Mariners really catastrophic mismanagement over the last 15 years. And coincidentally, they haven't made the playoffs in that long. But
they do have Nelson Cruz. That's the important
thing. They had an ownership and a CEO, because the ownership's Nintendo. They're in Japan, and they don't even care. But the CEO, Howard Lincoln, and the president, Chuck Armstrong, they were jealous of personnel guys who made decisions where they didn't get the credit, so they brought in weaker and weaker guys. And I think that's what happens when the people up top care too much about credit as opposed to winning. One of the reasons the Seahawks are so successful is they have an owner in Paul Allen who does nothing to interfere. Nothing. He, when the Jim Mora, Tim Russell stuff was going on in like 2009, he stepped in and brought in a search committee and got Pete Carroll and John Schneider. But when things are running well, that's when you want an invisible owner. And I think in Washington's case, this was a situation where McLuhan got too much of the credit for Bruce Allen's taste and certainly for Dan Snyder's taste. And with Bruce Allen, I mean, here's a guy who, he's a president, he's supposed to be kind of an overseer, but he's also been, an executive. And there's the whole, potential nepotism thing, which I'm sure makes him a bit less secure about his own sort of standing. And when you bring in a guy like McLuhan, I mean, he is unvarnished. He has baggage, but he is as universally respected for his ability as anyone in this league. So it's a situation that was going to be fraught from day one because the guys up top want the credit. And when the guys up top want the credit, the strong people underneath them will be elbowed out and the weak guys will step up. And if you want to make another Trump correlation, there you go.
There you go. Doug Farrar doing it all on the internet. Politics, sports, football. Not necessarily in that order, but just depends on which day. BR_ Doug Farrar is the way to follow him, as well as at Bleacher Report. He is their NFL lead scout. On to the quarterbacks here. And, I didn't go to the Combine 2 weeks ago. I took the year off, and usually it comes down to where the quarterbacks are going to be drafted and who wants what Carson Wentz out there. I'm not sure anyone really wants this Trubisky kid. We'll find out. But the Romo, the Garoppolo, the Osweiler, all of this has been sort of a late blooming market, except for the Browns stealing a second round draft pick and, forcing $16 million out the side door for a quarterback who might or might not be able to play.
Yeah. So is your question about the Combine or the...
Well, just quarterbacks in general. This has been... Usually we're pretty quick to the bit to get our Tony Romo or to get our Osweiler. It feels like no one's really jumping at the bait on Garoppolo or running around to make Tony Romo their quarterback for as long as he can stand up, quite frankly.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing with Romo is if he's traded, the team inherits that cap hit, and then they have to renegotiate, and the injury history is obviously prohibitive. In Garoppolo's case, Belichick keeps saying he's not on the block. We're not trading him, which of course is crap. If they get the right offer, they'll trade him. In Osweiler's case, I mean, that was just, you have one team who can offload it, who wants to pick up that extra draft pick, and Osweiler has not proven that he can do anything. So then you deal with the draft guys. I mean, Trubisky played 1 year. I think he has a lot on the ball, but I think like Jared Goff is a 2 to 3 year project. I think Deshaun Watson has the most on the ball. I think he can have Teddy Bridgewater type impact, but you don't know. I mean, you look at Robert Griffin's injury history, you look at Bridgewater's injury history, guys who are built like Watson is built, you know, the 6'2", 6'3", 215 to 220 range. It hasn't been a good time for those guys injury-wise in recent years.
Well, especially if they want to run around with the football a little bit too, you know, which is part of their game, which is what makes them special.
And I think Watson is the best quarterback in this draft class, but we'll see how that plays out. I mean, I just did a thing where I watched a bunch of plays with Davis Webb, the quarterback from Cal. He's one of the smartest players I've ever talked to. And there are times when his tape is tremendous, and there are times when his mechanics get all out of kilter and things sort of fall apart. My point is, none of these quarterbacks in this draft class are immediate starters. They're all projects. So if you put too much on any of these guys, you're going to regret it because you're going to put too much pressure on their shoulders. They will not be able to deliver at that point. And that's what happened with Jared Goff last year. Carson Wentz, he had a bit more of a favorable situation. I think as the Eagles get better receivers, he'll be in a better spot. But there is no Andrew Luck or Russell Wilson or Robert Griffin III in this draft. I would be shocked if any of these guys were able to come in and have that sort of impact.
And when that happens, Glennon gets $15 million, and guys like Jay Cutler are out there available to run your organization, right?
Right. And meanwhile, Colin Kaepernick gets no looks from anybody. Nothing suspicious about that at all.
Well, I bumped into Ray Rice on Sunday, too. He was here for Torrey Smith holds a big charity basketball event here every year. And, you know, the list of guys getting blackballed by the league now for various reasons, some just, unjust, or at least debatable, you know, it is a monopoly, right? I mean, there's only one league you can work for, one shield you can work for, unless you want to go to Canada and run around the CFL, right?
You know who Tyreek Hill is, right?
Yes.
You know that there are teams putting a first-round grade on Joe Mixon regardless, right?
Oh, I hear you.
If Ray Rice could still break tackles, he'd be in the NFL. Thank you and good night.
Oh, there you go. All right, so you're on the washed-up side.
This really isn't complicated.
Well, what about Colin Kaepernick, though? That story's a whole different political animal, correct?
Well, it is a political animal, and my colleague Mike Freeman has been reporting on this for months, and there are people running teams in the NFL who believe that Kaepernick is far more poisonous than people who have beaten up women because of his political leanings, because he will not stand up and, you know, do what people deem proper and appropriate for a national anthem. And you can debate the logic of that all day. Just give me a headache. But if that's where it is and that's how the league perceives him, that if he's being blackballed, that's collusion, and the NFLPA needs to look into it. But even if it's not, you got a guy who threw 16 touchdowns and 4 picks last year, as opposed to a guy the Bears just gave $45 million over 3 years, $15 million guaranteed, and he hasn't started a game since 2014. So, and if I'm the owner of one of those teams who's passing on Kaepernick because of reasons other than football, if I'm the owner of that team, I'm asking my guy, what are you doing here? Are you using your own personal beliefs to scuttle our depth at the most important position in the game?
Yeah, Doug, I mean, we're talking about other guys who
potentially fireable offense.
Yeah, these other people had criminal acts, right? I mean, Michael Vick went to prison and got a job. You know, I'll be honest. I mean, I remember where I was the night I was at a Ravens preseason game the night that Vick signed with the Eagles, and I'm like, wow, you know, that's kind of a ballsy. You know, I never expected that a team would stick up and stick out for him. I just didn't believe he would ever play again. That was my belief at the time.
I think the perception with him was that he paid the price. 2 years in prison, lost $100 million. The other thing that Mike Freeman has been reporting is that people are using this Kaepernick situation to tell other players in the league that if you get political, this is what will happen to you. And if that's true, we have a much bigger problem where Colin Kaepernick is going to play in 2017.
Well, I'm sure we'll all be covering that, all be following that as the free agency continues on. Hey, Doug, I'm going to Phoenix this weekend. By the time I get back, will the Raiders be in Las Vegas?
Very possibly.
Yeah, I don't. I've been to Oakland many times. I know you have as well. I don't know there's anything that's going to hold that team there. I mean, I just, having investigated as much as I have, just being there and knowing people around the situation, I don't know what saves them. It doesn't feel like any silver and black horse is going to ride over the hill there out of Hayward and build them a stadium. I just think it's, to my way of thinking, it's a foregone conclusion, right?
Yeah, it's San Diego Part 2. Stadium isn't going to happen. Money talks and everyone else rides the bus. That's, so they're on the move. There's no question about that.
Doug, love having you on, man. Love the rock and roll. Keep the music coming out and the Adrian Ballou hits and all that good stuff. We'll be following you out on Bleacher Report as well. You're doing some other stuff coming up here, heading into the off season. What are you working on, man?
Well, I mentioned the piece with Davis Webb. I'm doing a series of pieces where I watch tape with draft prospects. Gives kind of a good insight into what really goes on during plays as opposed to what we think. The reality is often very different, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, man, it's always good to sit around and watch football outside of football season. You got more time to interpret it and less time for all the noise. He is Doug Farrar, BR_Doug Farrar, out at Bleacher Report. He is their NFL lead scout. Doug, keep the faith, man. Better days are ahead. And if not, we've at least got some rock and roll this summer.
There you go.
There he goes. Thanks, Doug Farrar, Bleacher Report, joining us here. You can find me out in the Bahia Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app, and we come in crystal clear. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. And last but never least, any breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis Colossus will be here on Thursday, driving you home, getting you ready for the remnants of March Madness in the Sweet 16. I'm gearing up for the Caps and the Wizards going west next week as well, and the Orioles coming north next week as we get ready for opening day 2 weeks from now at Oriole Park at Camden Yards and get through this World Baseball Classic and all this other stuff. Plenty going on around here, plenty to talk about. I'm taking emails all the time, and of course all of our social media channels are open. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube. And we will be in Phoenix, Arizona, beginning on Sunday for the NFL owners meetings, the little Cactus Baseball as well. You'll want to follow along out there along with us. We're going to London in September with the Ravens, taking well over 100 of you with us. We had more people sign up earlier this week. Some new details up on the website under the Road Trips tab at WNST.net. If you need some personal attention, feel free. Hit me on Facebook. Throw me an email, nasty at WNST.net. We'll get you going. Waiting on Green Bay, Nashville, Minnesota, and the aforementioned Oakland, Vegas. Who knows where the Raiders are going to play next year? I'll let you know when I know. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.